Welcome back, legends. I hope you're all fantastic as always. It is time for another installment of Friday Q&A. Yet another week has absolutely flown by. Thank you to everybody who submitted a question for this week's Q&A. And if you would like me to answer anything at all, put your question in the comment section below. If you want to support what I do, you can support me directly by signing up to my Patreon, or you can purchase some of the music or merch that I make with my band Ragdoll, like one of these t-shirts that I'm wearing. You can even cut the sleeves off yourself if you don't believe in sleeves like me. Anyway, let's get into this week's questions. Richie Cochran is amazing. I'm convinced Richie Cochran is actually some kind of cyborg because amazing guitar chops. Like Ken Shred with the best of them, his Shrapnel solo album, the first one, is insane. And he's got legato chops of doom, and now he doesn't even need a pick and he just dominates. But he can also be incredibly lyrical and tasty and has amazing phrasing and amazing guitar tone and has one of the best rock voices of all time. It's like Paul Rodgers and Chris Cornell had a baby, and that baby, I don't know, somehow was absorbed by the cyborg Richie Cochran. And Richie can basically play every instrument really, really well. There was that song, I feel like it was a moment when the world went, oh, Richie Cochran is amazingly good at being amazing. What was the song? Paying Dues, and he's playing bass on it and singing, playing drums on it, and it just still slams. So yeah, go and check out some Cochran if you haven't done that. I like the Winery Dogs, but I think I much prefer Richie's solo stuff, and especially when he kind of gets a little bit Hendrixy, a little bit laid back and bluesy. That's my favorite Richie Cochran stuff, almost when it's that nice blend of really soulful bluesy singing and soulful bluesy chops plus ridiculous legato. That's the stuff I really like. What do I think of Fender Offsets? They have become really, really popular recently. I feel like even 10 years ago, if you were playing a Jazzmaster style guitar and you were playing anything except shoegaze, that was a pretty interesting choice. But I feel like especially the Jazzmaster and the Jag have really become normalized and celebrated in the Fender lineup, and it's not a super weird thing to see anymore. I would love to grab a Jazzmaster style guitar, but I know the point is that they have that trem system on them and you can get the mastery bridges and the pickups, but it would be really cool to have one, I don't know, just put a set of Fishmans in and have a hardtail bridge and maybe make it a baritone and tune it down to drop A or something, because I do like that particular shape. You've also got that kind of idea with other non-Fender brands, like the Dunable guitars have some really cool offset style shapes. What's the other one? Built as well, do some really cool looking offset style guitars. So yeah, I don't think offset guitars are novel anymore, which, you know, I'm totally cool with. The more choices we have, the better in general. But I still think my favorite offset guitar is actually the Firebird. Is it an offset? Can I recommend any good mixing tutorials on YouTube? Dan Worrell. Go and watch all of Dan's stuff on Dan's YouTube channel and watch all the stuff Dan has produced for companies like FabFilter as well. Just that magic combination of someone who's incredibly knowledgeable and good at what they do, entertaining as a presenter, and just kind of generous with the way they put all this information out there totally for free for all of us to try to soak up like sponges. Dan's incredible. If you're more into metal mixing stuff, I really like the Hardcore Music Studio tutorials on there. There's a bunch of just really good short tips on there. And then you've got stuff like Produce Like a Pro as well, Warren Hewitt. Lots and lots of great content out there. I do find with mixing tutorials that kind of like everything, you know, it's the same thing in the guitar world, you know. For Guitar Gear reviews, it's the one Tube Screamer clone that will change your life, or learn this one Jimmy Page lick and become a pro. There's so much of that when it comes to mixing, you know, the one EQ trick that will transform your mixes, the one compression trick that the pros use. You know, you're going to see a lot of that clickbait. Is just how YouTube works. But the reality is that there's no one thing you're going to learn that's just going to teach you how to mix. It is something you just have to do and do lots of. And it's something that you will continuously be refining and iterating and getting better at. So I would encourage you, if you are looking for mixing tutorials, try to approach it from the perspective of having a growth mindset, that you watch a video and you're going to try and incorporate that trick into something that you can use going forward. And then the next day you're like, cool, what new thing can I learn about mixing? And also try to practice it. Have stuff where, you know, you might use some stems that are available on the internet, or you might use a particular track you've put together where you can just focus on specific elements and have fun. Have I been keeping up with the developments with the Headfirst Alta amplifier? Yes, I have. I actually spoke on the phone with Jason from Headfirst today, and I absolutely talked Jason's ear off because I'm really excited about this particular amp. So hopefully I will be able to try out that prototype pretty soon. And when I do, of course, I will make a bunch of noise and film it and tell you all what I think about it. And it just excites me to see someone like Jason who just loves what they do. You know, it just seems like the prime motivation there is to share the love of great Marshall style tube amp tones. And Jason's YouTube channel, Headfirst Amplification, is an absolute wealth of knowledge as well. And if you're not subscribed to that, go and check it out, because if you like what I do, you will love what Jason does. And Jason can give so much more of a technical insight as to why things sound good than I can. And that amp looks like it's going to be something awesome. What would I recommend for a good cheap studio setup for a beginner? I would say figure out what your budget is and try to allocate as much of your budget to your monitoring solution and to treating your room. You can do a lot of DIY stuff to your room, like building some pretty basic little bass traps and things like that, and just buy the best monitors that you can afford. And then that way, I would then say, hey, if you only want to record your own guitar, go and get a very basic little interface like a Focusrite Scarlett 2i2. They're cheap, they work, they're supported, everybody has them, and you could fire that up with your computer and just use even some free guitar plugins and a cheap DAW. You know, everybody always talks about Reaper. I personally don't use Reaper, but for what it does for $50 or $60, it's pretty amazing. And just focus on the actual making music part of stuff there, because you don't want to go too far down that gear rabbit hole at the start. Otherwise, you will become so fixated on specs and you won't spend any time making music. So something like a little Focusrite interface, you know, obviously, I'm assuming you have a computer that is going to be able to run a couple of plugins. Go all in on your monitoring solution, get the best stuff that you can afford. Again, you don't have to spend $1 million to get something that's going to work. You might even just need a good set of headphones to start off, and dive into the process of recording your own music and enjoying that creative process. Again, it's something that you want to grow with and develop over time, and look at it just kind of as an investment in yourself and your music. And like anything else, even if you only get personal enjoyment out of it, I think that seems like a worthwhile investment. What do I take to gigs aside from the standard stuff like a guitar and my rig? So here's an example. Last night we did a show. We've been doing this residency at a place called Convenience in Perth. If you're in Perth, come and check it out on a Wednesday night. But I only took one guitar, and I took my FM3 and my in-ears rig, and that was kind of what I use. But let's get the guitar bag before it moves away, and I'll show you the little things that I keep in the front pocket of my guitar bag. So I have a Shure microphone case with a bunch of stuff in it. I have, there's my wireless. It was in there the whole time. I have this NUX wireless, which is really, really good. And I've got a set of just Ernie balls. These are the perennial spares. I ended up putting some Diodario XTs on my SC245, which I'm going to do a video about. But the real fun happens inside this little Shure microphone case. See all the little goodies. So what do we got here? We have a spare set of foam earplugs in case I forget my in-ears and I don't want to blow my hearing out for the rest of the week. I've got a bunch of guitar picks in this little bag here. I have some Dr. Duck's Axe Wax and String Lube. This stuff is great for cleaning your strings, keeping your guitar parts clean, keeping your guitar kind of gunk-free. I have a lint-free cloth to use with that. I have a pair of pliers in, well, they used to kind of be a mustard color. They're like a very dirty mustard right now. I have a slide, which I don't think I ever really used, but you know, it's there. I have a bunch of these little sets of like jeweler's screwdrivers in case, let's see that. Come on, get the focus on there. Doesn't want to focus on it, that's fine. I have a truss rod adjuster for my guitars, very, very handy. I think I've got a spare set of strap locks in here, and look at this, I've got a ragdoll sticker so I can put it up in the bathroom of venues that we play at. So that's what's living in there. And then I also take my backpack with me. So what do I have in here? I've got a set of Samsung, what are these called? Yeah, these are like the Galaxy Buds, so that, you know, if I want to listen to music on the way to a gig, I can do that. I've got my Monty Burns Spreading Peace on Earth mask, absolutely essential. In here, I've got an Air Step, which we have actually been using as a page scroller for an iPad. We've been doing a gig where part of it is live rock band karaoke, and having the lyrics on an iPad is really important, so you can scroll without having to bend down and do that. Got an iPad in a case, and then all the important stuff, you know, always have a toothbrush and toothpaste on you. You never know when you'll need it. And a couple of pairs of socks, t-shirts, undies. I don't think you need to see any of that stuff in there, but then I have a backup for my backup, which is one of these new Moore preamp model X2s, which I will do a video with very soon. You can load your own cab sims into this one, which is really, really cool. So this is my break glass in case of emergency. I haven't had to use it yet. Hopefully I never have to use it, but it is a really cool thing on its own. Sometimes I will take my GoPro to gigs as well, and you've all seen, and you all love the absolute potato cam footage that I get out of that. One last question to round out this week's Q&A. Why is everybody so obsessed with the 80s? Just culturally in general. If you look at what's happening in film and TV, like look at all these Star Wars reboots that are happening, look at stuff like cyberpunk in the kind of video game industry. You know, if you've heard the new War on Drugs album, it basically sounds like 80s Bruce Springsteen. The last Miley Cyrus album was basically a synthwave album. Synthwave as a thing, you know, bands like The Midnight are amazing. I love that stuff, even though it's just kind of 80s on steroids. Obviously, you know, Guitar Gear is re-embracing stuff that was popular in the 80s again. You know, Chorus is back. People kind of like Pitch Detune. People like myself are re-exploring old rack units. Personally, for me, if I was 18 at the moment, this would be the best time ever, because when I was 18, nobody liked the 80s. It was so uncool. And I was that weirdo at my high school wearing a headband, playing a Flying V, going, how good were the 80s? How good was Warren DeMartini and George Lynch? And finally, the world is catching up to me when I was 18. But in all seriousness, I think it's probably down to, you know, a bunch of people like myself who were born at the end of the 80s, looking at it through the lens of nostalgia. We weren't there, so we just get to cherry pick the best stuff. And then maybe people who were a little bit older at the time for it to be super cool, or who had responsibilities in their life come in the 90s, like kids. Now their kids are old enough to be out of home, and they've got disposable income, and they can, you know, finally go and get back into guitar or get back into whatever their passion was when they were a kid. So it's probably a confluence of those things, where for people who are, you know, under the age of 20, it's pure nostalgia. The 80s was a long time ago, so we don't know what it was like, and we're curious about it. People like me, who were born at the end of the 80s, who kind of remember little bits of it. It's like, hey, how good was childhood? Remember that? And then people who got to fully experience it, and then, you know, everything else after that kind of sucked, and then they get to revisit it, but thanks to modern technology. So I don't know, there's my cultural critique of the 80s. I'm sure, like anything else, nostalgia works in these big cycles. Everything works in these big cycles. And in 5 or 10 years, we'll be going, oh, yeah, no, that was terrible. You know, remember like the mid-2000s when it was retro 70s again? Like just everything, whether it was, you know, bands like Jet and Wolfmother and The Strokes and Austin Powers and all that kind of stuff. And now we're onto the 80s. I'm sure, well, it's actually probably already coming back. I'm sure retro new metal is going to be a thing. Does that still make it new? I don't know. Someone come up with a word for that. But there's my hot take on why we all love the 80s. Probably because the 80s was like a high watermark of like the United States as a cultural force as well. So yeah, lots of stuff to think about there. I'm going to go and play some guitar for the rest of the weekend anyway, and probably listen to a bunch of 80s stuff. I'll listen to a bunch of 90s stuff and 70s stuff as well, because, you know, just because something is from a particular era, that doesn't mean it's going to be good or bad. And there's just good stuff and then a whole bunch of crap from every era as well. So I hope you all do the same. Have a fantastic weekend. If you've got a question you would like me to answer on next week's Q&A, let me know in the comments. Let me know why you think the 80s or the 70s or, you know, the early 2000s were the best time in history. I'll see you all next week. Take it easy.